be breaking something that somebody nearby had made, or somebody earlier had made, but it was particularly if it was something that somebody had recently made, whoever had made it would bring vigorous objections to the destruction.
Claude, you left folk dancing without telling us how proficient you became. You were one of the school's most outstanding dancers. Morris dancing?
I won a place on the Morris dance team.
Yes, you did.
And we went on a good many demonstration trips. And I remember going to Troy State University in Alabama, and Montevallo, and New Orleans, and Baton Rouge, and somewhere else in Louisiana. Mr. Fredericks had somehow acquired an old school bus, an old Chevrolet school bus would haul about 20 or 30 children, and we would pile in that thing, and you know, I really didn't think it would ever get there and come back, but it never did let us down. It always, I don't remember, maybe one time, I think maybe once we had a flat tire it caused us. And once we were in New Orleans, or in Louisiana, and there was a storm, and the highway was blocked. And we went and found somebody on the bus, found a saw, borrowed a saw from some farmer nearby, and cut logs to get trees out of the roads to reopen the road. And we were a good many hours stalled somewhere north of, somewhere between Alexandria and Baton Rouge, as well as I remember. But I did very much enjoy the folk dancing, and when, actually I didn't get to graduate, because in 1937, now we had a folk dance troupe at the San Diego World Fair in 1936. We'd had an earlier one at the Chicago World's Fair in 1933. 1935 in San Diego, because 1936 I graduated, and the Old Globe Shakespearean Theater built a theater at the Texas Centennial Exposition, and they had, and moved from San Diego to Texas, from the San Diego 1935 World's Fair to the Texas Centennial Exposition and World's Fair in 1936, and I was one of 12 or 14, 16 maybe, organic students that danced there, and their ballyhoo, their attraction was the folk dancers. And they had what they called a green. Actually, it was a green-colored, concrete paved pit with steps around, and people stood and sat. Many people would sit on the steps while the folk dancers danced. And Betty Tone provided the music, playing a recorder. And Betty learned to play well enough that we were able to learn to dance. And we danced those dances, and then we would have bit parts in the plays. You know, the crowd scenes and things, when none of us ever became thespians by any stretch of the imagination, but we had a good time. Lasted from May until sometime in October, maybe the 1st of November.
Did you say you didn't graduate from elementary school?
Well, I didn't get to graduate in the sense that we had to leave the week of graduation in order to be in Dallas at the opening of that Centennial Exposition. Our employment So I didn't have to go look for a job. I had something to go into directly out of high school, so several of us missed our graduation ceremony.
Well, Claude, when you went on to college, did you find it academically difficult having come from the organic school?
No way. I scored very highly on their placement tests, and I had heard so many stories about how difficult the entrance examinations were. Well, when I went to the university, I found that they didn't have entrance examinations, they had placement tests. And I scored quite highly on all the placement tests, sufficiently so that the next year at the registration period, I was a registration counselor. And I did that the 3 years that I was at the university. I had actually started college work going to the University of Alabama Mobile Center when it was located at the corner of Royal Street and St. Francis in the old federal building in Mobile in 1948. See, after I got out of the folk dancing business ended, and I came home and I went out fishing on a Starfish and Oyster Company fishing smack in January. Did that through January, February, and March, and the engine broke down on the vessel, so that was the end of that thing. And I started selling fuller brushes in Mobile. And I did so very well. I was making like $75 a week or more selling fuller brushes in Mobile in 1937. And there were not very many people making as much as $5 a day. Henry Ford had set the industrial world on its ear by paying $5 a day wages. And so $5 a day was becoming the industrial daily wage, although labor in general was still $1 a day. People don't know it, don't think about it, don't remember it, but when I got out of the Navy and went in business for myself in 1947, I paid men 30 cents an hour, and that was $2.40 a day. And that was the going standard wage around Fairhope for a good many years. But I have never found any sort. Everything about my education experience is that I got a better education than 90% of the other people as far as high school education is concerned. And as far as prepared for university, I was far better prepared. But of course, by the time I got to university, I was 28 years old. We'd had a war, and I decided that, I volunteered and got in the Navy. And at the time the war started, I was working for the U.S. Bureau of Public Roads. And they sent me down to Panama to work on the Trans-Isthmian Highway. But when I was in high school, before I graduated, I decided that I wanted to become a civil engineer. And after coming back here in between, I would alternate between Fairhope and Dallas. We'd lived in Dallas several years, and Dallas somehow or another appealed to me. At that time, I still wanted to say I was a Texan. And nowadays, I don't mind saying that I live in Alabama, but I very seldom ever mention the fact that I was born in Flint, Michigan. That doesn't seem to be necessary at all. But by the time I got in the Navy after having worked 3 years or so for the Bureau of Public Roads in Panama, I discovered that everybody who didn't work for the Panama Canal or the Panama Canal Railroad or was in the service, all other civilians were trash or treated very badly. It was rough. And I decided by the time I got away from there that I was never going to work for the federal government again. It was a matter, appealed to me as being a matter of being on a ladder and the fellow below you trying to grab you by the heel and throw you off, and the fellow above trying to step on your fingers and kick you off. And I just decided I didn't have to put up with that kind of foolishness. And by the time I got through the Navy in 1946, I had 3 children, and I decided that of all the kicking around that I'd done, I had worked in Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Texas, North Carolina, in the Panama Canal Zone, and Cuba and Costa Rica. And in the Navy, I went from East Coast to West Coast and to England and through the Normandy invasion. And while waiting for what we didn't know what we were waiting for at the time, but while we were waiting for the invasion, we had a bit of free time, and I spent as much time traveling around England as I could, and Scotland. I never did get to Ireland. But I decided that after all that, I had never seen a place that appealed to me as a better place to live and raise children than Fairhope. And I wanted my children to have the educational advantage that I had had. So I looked for something that I could do that would let me stay in Fairhope, and made contact with the county surveyor who lived here, and he happily employed me, offered me a partnership, said that he was getting too old to do the field work, and if I would do the field work, he would tell me where to go and what to do, and he'd do the office work, and we'd both make lots of money. It didn't work out. I haven't made lots of money, but I managed to stay in Fairhope. He died, I came home, I was discharged out of the Navy on the 10th of December, 1945. And I went to work for him January 1st, 1946. And I'd been working a few days, and my dad said, when are you going back to work? I said, oh, I went back to work Monday. You did? You're not going to leave Fairhope? You're not going to go back to the Bureau? I said, no. He said, well, how do you think you're going to feed your family? I said, I've taken a job with Harry Parker. He said, well, I'll say again, how the hell do you think you're going to feed your family? However, by midsummer 1948, he was working for me. And he did work for me from the rest of his life. In fact, by the time he died, many people thought that he had started this surveying business and brought me up as a surveyor. So I feel like that's an accomplishment on my part, as well as on his part. At one time, when I left Fairhope, we did not have a happy relationship. I